Welcome everyone to the Wealth of Health podcast. My name is Ahmed, and with me as always is Dr. Paul Jenkins, consultant physician and endocrinologist.
Welcome.
Today's topic is vitamin D. Paul, since COVID, there's been a lot of conversations about vitamin D, its benefits, how large section of the population is deficient in the level, how it helps protect against inflammation, reduces the risk of a lot of cancers. It's even, its benefits on bones. So I think in this episode, we should really just dive deeper into vitamin D and break it down for everyone.
Completely agree. It's an incredibly powerful vitamin, or almost it's a cross between a vitamin and a hormone. So
Right. So that's a good starting point.
Yeah.
What's vitamin D then?
It's it's a cross between vitamin and hormone. It's derived from cholesterol, which many people may not know. Our body makes a precursor of it, which is then converted in the skin under ultraviolet light, so sunshine, to the beginning of the more active form of vitamin D, D3. So that's where we actually get most of our vitamin D, is from sun exposure on the skin.
Okay, you can get it also from food, no?
You can, and it's why, it tastes absolutely awful, why your great grandmother would have given you cod liver oil. You had a spoonful of cod liver oil because it's very rich in vitamin D.
Okay.
It tastes foul. I tell you, it's much easier just take a vitamin D capsule. It's an easier form. But, most of it comes from the skin under sunshine. You need probably 15 to 30 minutes of exposure to sun in the summer months, and without sun factor. So lots of my patients say, oh, it's all right, I'm always out in the sun. Say yes, but usually nowadays, because we're so worried about skin cancer, you cover yourself with factor 50. So it stops complete production of vitamin D.
And also, is it, I always think about these things, is half an hour in the sun, what, fully naked?
Well, I
that's
went
the
to a
ideal
lecture once,
scenario.
and they said the best way of doing it in Sweden is you've got to stand naked for 20 minutes.
Right.
You do that in Sweden. In London, you can get a bit of trouble doing that, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend that.
True.
But you've got to have significant skin exposure to sunshine without sun factor. And it's also blocked by glass, so it's got to be outdoors.
Okay.
So people who are savvy would say, right, okay, I'll have 15, 30 minutes of sun exposure and then apply sunscreen.
Right. But what is the function of vitamin D? I mean, why is it so important? What's the big deal about this vitamin?
Okay, well, to my mind, I think it is the most important, I've got to be careful, almost one of the most important vitamins. It has really wide-ranging effects on all aspects of the body. So we, as an endocrinologist, we know it has what we call endocrine effects. So that's where it's circulating in the bloodstream and works on its own receptors. We know it has paracrine effects, which is where it is produced by different tissues locally and then works locally. And it also has what we call autocrine effects, where it's actually produced in individual cells and then affects those cells itself. So,
Wow.
And the receptors for vitamin D are distributed throughout the whole body, virtually every organ. So it's not just people say, oh, vitamin D, that equals bone. It's much, much more wide-ranging effects than that.
Okay. Can we talk about some of those effects on various organs in the body, for example?
Yeah. I mean, as I said, the most important is one of the most recognized ones is on bone. Yes.
Right.
So in years gone by, when we weren't getting enough vitamin D, it's the cause of rickets.
Okay.
Yeah. So fortunately, and thank goodness, for the last 150 years, rickets has now been eradicated,
Yes.
and largely also through taking vitamin D. Vitamin D is added to foodstuffs. There's some fortified vitamin D. So we don't see rickets, but we do see, if it's very deficient, it's a significant cause of osteoporosis, so thinning of the bones as we get older.
Okay.
And it can cause other abnormalities, something called osteomalacia, which is also inadequate calcification of bone. So those are the bone issues. It increases your risk of fractures.
Right.
In sportsmen, really interesting, a particular interest of mine is its role in exercise. It increases the risk of shin splints, of stress fractures, and of actual fractures. And if you supplement that in, gymnasts, athletes doing high intensity exercise, it dramatically reduces the risk of fractures and of all those conditions.
Wow. Okay. Anything, because I've been reading a lot about the impact of vitamin D on reducing inflammation, for example, across the whole body. And sometimes, I think what came after COVID is that basically, if everyone had sufficient vitamin D levels, they can reduce the risk of being hospitalized. Is that
Yeah.
true? Because there's a lot of research coming out right now, but there's been none of that before COVID, which is very interesting.
Yes, yeah. I would agree with that. I'm passionately believe that vitamin D will significantly improve your immunity and reduces the risk of severe COVID. And there's been a lot of, I think, very good high quality studies showing that. I also, people then say, well, we don't really need it, or you shouldn't be taking it. There's no evidence for it. Well,
Mm.
I said, it's a natural substance. We can measure the levels in blood now very accurately. So you're not going to overdose on it. You need a massive dose of vitamin D to overdose.
Mm.
Yeah. So why would you not be taking vitamin D supplement? Yeah. And we know in the UK, especially in the northern hemispheres, individuals are at very high risk of deficiency of vitamin D. Look in the UK, looking outside today, there's not a lot of sunshine.
I know.
So and even when there is sunshine, as I said earlier, we cover up and or apply sunscreen.
Yes.
So it's very, very common to be deficient in vitamin D. So why would you then not take a supplement to get our levels up into the high normal range? Yeah? And it does, to my mind, have very marked effects on your immune system. One of the most common illnesses I see is post-viral fatigue, long COVID.
Right.
Yes. And in my experience, I don't think I've had any patient with that who's had normal vitamin D levels. And
Wow.
the first step I do is get you on high strength vitamin D. Then we know we've addressed that issue. Your immune system is going to be enhanced, and then slowly we can begin the recovery.
So does that mean that everyone who lives, in hot, sunny places naturally have the right levels of vitamin D?
If they are outside, yes, but don't forget dark coloured skin. So black people make less vitamin D for the same sun exposure.
Why
So
is that?
because the skin isn't producing under the ultraviolet light, which protects from getting burned, but isn't then producing as much of the vitamin D. So it's much more common to be, you can have vitamin D deficiency in sunny places. And
Okay.
then in the Middle East, clearly women are incredibly common to be low in vitamin D because they're completely covered.
Right.
So it's almost, virtually 100% vitamin D deficient. So they are now acknowledging in the Middle East of the importance of vitamin D supplementation. It's now becoming pretty routine
Right.
amongst Arabic people.
Okay. So if we say you mentioned that it's the blood test to measure the levels of vitamin D. How big of a deal is that for
It's not
people?
a big
Is
deal.
it the simple, just draw some blood and
Yeah,
run the
absolutely.
test? Is
Yeah.
it very expensive?
No, it's not. It used to be. The blood test is now, it's been available, I don't know, 10, 15 years. So
Okay.
before then we weren't able to measure it. But now we can measure it, and it's a simple routine blood test. So you know exactly what your levels are. If you're deficient, how deficient you are. And conversely, once you start taking supplements, get your levels into the high normal range. I would add, that the amount of supplements we need is much, much higher than the government recommends.
Right.
So
That's very interesting actually, because can you tell me what the normal ranges are? So I did my blood test.
Yep.
What's the normal range of vitamin D level?
Okay. It's the unit of measurement is nanomoles per liter. So you need to check that because some assays and in the States it's micrograms. But if you check nanomoles per liter,
Yeah.
then deficiency is less than 50 nanomoles per liter. Yeah. Borderline 50 to 75, and then 75 to 100. And I like my patients to be well above 100. Yes. And it says the normal range is the top of the normal range is 200.
Okay.
So there's a lot. So between 100 and 200. But even then, the symptoms of overdose of vitamin D, which I say you need a really, really high dose, is because of its effects on the body's calcium absorption. So vitamin D increases calcium absorption through the gut. And so if you're vitamin D toxic, we call it, then eventually your calcium levels will increase. And that's when you get into the side effects. You don't want too high a calcium.
Right.
But as I said, you need a big dose. The current NHS recommendations is 400 IU, international units, of vitamin D3 a day. In my experience, people need 2,000 to 5,000 units a day. I personally, I take
If they are deficient, or
or
just
just low normal.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
okay.
I take 5,000 units every day of vitamin D3. My levels are just above 100. So right in the middle of the normal range.
So just because you take a lot more, it doesn't mean your body will absorb as much of that as possible. There's some resistance to absorbing all the amounts that you take in.
Well, to some extent, but it just shows that we need much more than the much higher dose than is the recommended one.
Do some people have vitamin D resistance?
Oh, yes, yeah.
Which means the receptors in the
You
body
can.
are
That's
not
quite a specialist, and it's quite a specialist area of endocrinology.
right.
Yes, and it's pretty rare.
Okay.
Very rare. So for the vast majority of people, you just take a vitamin D3 capsule, 2,000 units to get your levels checked. Just get on with life. Then you've sorted out any possibility of deficiency.
So there's thousands of vitamin D supplements out there.
Yeah.
From every supermarkets even have them.
Yeah.
So how do I know that I'm getting a good quality vitamin D supplement?
Yeah. You don't really. It's just got to try and get it from a reputable brand.
Okay.
But then I would say, start it, and then it's a fat-soluble vitamin, so the levels go up very slowly. So that means it's absorbed into all of our fat tissue. So it's not, the levels won't immediately go up in the blood. It takes a long time to reach steady state levels if you're deficient in it. So you need to take it for a good few weeks and then recheck your levels.
Interesting. And also, when my doctor prescribed vitamin D to me, he said, just have it with a fatty meal. Why is
Well,
that?
it is because it's derived from cholesterol.
Right.
Yes, it is a fat-soluble vitamin. So, that could possibly increase its absorption. But
Okay.
I'm a great believer in just keep things to as simple as possible. So just take a capsule first thing in the morning, bam, done.
So you can take it on an empty stomach?
Yeah.
No problem.
No.
Okay. Well, a lot of people say that if you take vitamin D, you have to take vitamin K with
Yes.
it. Is that true?
Not really, no. There's theoretical evidence that vitamin K is needed for the effects of vitamin D on the bone. It helps with one of the genes, osteocalcin, which is a substance which helps strengthen the bone. But in general, you can just take vitamin D.
So vitamin D pretty much has an impact on everything
Yes,
in the body.
I think so. Yes, I mean, if you look at the receptors, yes. When I was, 10, 15 years ago and doing research, genomic research into genes, and I was interested in hormones and cancer, we had a group of cell lines, cancer cell lines. We looked at every gene in the body, and you could just see in the early days whether they were upregulated or downregulated. This exciting, quite cutting-edge stuff in those days. We then incubated those cells with vitamin D, and it was the most powerful effect of any substance. The whole genome just went ballistic. And it was every gene was either upregulated or downregulated, not just the genes involved with bone or calcium metabolism. So it showed us that, in a generic way, it has extremely wide-ranging effects. Subsequently, studies have shown it affects probably 3 to 5% of all genes are directly influenced by vitamin D, which is a massive thing. So then if you start looking at the receptor distribution of vitamin D, as I said, it's very, very wide. So it's on immune system, we've discussed.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's on the immune cells. It's on the heart. So it has wide-ranging effects on the heart, can reduce the development of excess musculature of the heart, hypertrophy.
Yes.
So it's good for cardiac function. Yeah. We've discussed bone, which is some of its most common effects. It has wide-ranging effects on muscle, so increases muscle contractility and muscle strength. Another indication for athletes to take it. As a aside, athletes have been using vitamin D for over 100 years, knowing they should get under ultraviolet light to boost the vitamin D.
Right.
And if you want to be controversial, it's the most legalized form of doping. Yeah. It has a significant benefit on muscle contractility, both for fast twitch, for sprinters, etc., and for muscle strength. So, some studies, 9 to 16% improvement. Whereas if you're an elite athlete, that's a very, very significant enhancement. for just taking a vitamin. So,
And it also, I heard, it has an impact on testosterone levels in men.
well, yeah, then we're coming on to its direct or its influential effects on other endocrine systems.
Right.
So there is certainly a correlation between vitamin D levels and testosterone. So men who are deficient in vitamin D, excuse me, often have lower testosterone levels. And conversely, there's an association between the two. So quite why that is the case, we don't know. But that's true. And then perhaps, from my earlier research, one of the most exciting areas is its impact on cancer. So we know low levels of vitamin D are associated with increased risk of breast, of prostate, and of colon cancer. So
Wow.
3 of the most common cancers.
Right.
And, so another indication to supplement and get your levels up into the high normal range.
So I want to switch to a report that actually, funny enough, is coming out of Egypt, which I'm very proud of. It was mentioned on Dr. John Campbell's YouTube channel, and it studied the impact of vitamin D as a key player in COVID-19 immunity and lessons from the pandemic to combat immune evasive variants. The article basically concludes that if someone is vitamin D replete, they have a much lower risk of hospitalization and COVID-19 caused mortality, in some cases up to 80%. So, bit of a question, but did we know this? Did we always know this about vitamin D? And if we did, why it wasn't actually part of any advice about COVID, was it?
No, I completely agree. And I completely agree with him. Yeah. And it's not
Right.
just studies in Egypt. There were a lot of what we call epidemiological studies, so wide-based population studies looking at it and showing that patients with lower vitamin D had worse outcomes with COVID. And then it goes on, my own personal experience is that of long COVID. As I
Right.
said, virtually 100% of patients with long COVID have low or suboptimal vitamin D. So yes, I think, and I again would reiterate, it's such a simple thing to do. You're
Yes.
restoring patients to normality. So I don't understand anyone who says it's risky. And they say, oh, you patients can get toxic. Well, yes, you can get toxic if you're taking, 5, 10 times the dose that I would recommend,
Right.
2,000 units. So if you're taking 10,000, 20,000 units a day, then yes, you can get toxic. But patients
Over a
aren't.
period of time.
Yeah.
Okay,
But you're
so
not. But if you're taking 4,000 units a day, you're restoring your levels to normal. And yes, I do believe you will enhance your immunity and reduce your risk of severe infection complications of COVID and other viral illnesses.
that's incredible. Okay, so winter's coming.
Yeah.
People are going to start to have a lot of colds very frequently.
Mhm.
Is that one of the single most important advice that you would give people is go out there, test your levels of vitamin D. If you're deficient, take the supplement, get the levels up. You'll probably miss out on the cold this winter.
Well, I can't say, nothing in medicine is guaranteed. Yes.
Of
But
course.
you're definitely, to my mind, you're going to boost your immunity. Yeah. Your immune system. Again, we know you are highly likely coming winter now.
Yes.
Yeah. To be deficient in it. So why not do it? I take it. My wife takes it. I make my 2 sons, I don't make, got to be careful. I encourage them to take it. But yeah, it's just, to my mind, it's common sense and it's so cheap. It's not a dangerous, complicated substance. You're just taking a natural substance that in our current lifestyle, we don't get enough of because most of us are sedentary indoors.
So finally, so I've been taking it for a while now, and I have to say one of the changes I noticed is my mood.
Yeah.
I'm a bit more positive. I'm not as
Good.
grumpy as usual.
So,
I'm a bit debatable.
I haven't noticed, but yeah.
But does it actually also affect
Yeah.
your mood?
It does. We didn't discuss that, but it's a good point. Yeah. A lot of people, it affects the cognitive function. It can affect memory. Yes. And definitely people can feel better on it. Some patients, it's really dramatic. It's not quite a Lazarus-like effect,
Right.
the next day. But within a few days, they say, yeah, I feel markedly better on it, just all round. So that's another reason. An interesting factor we didn't discuss, but with immunity, it's been known its association with multiple sclerosis.
Right.
So multiple sclerosis is much, much more common as you progress north from the equator, correlating with worsening
Interesting.
sunshine and low vitamin D. And low vitamin D is associated with increased risk of developing multiple sclerosis. Multiple sclerosis is very, very rare in the sub-Saharan Africa.
That's true. Yeah.
So it just goes another indirect circumstantial evidence of the importance of vitamin D and in our immune function. So to my mind, I guess almost the takeaway message is it's cheap. It's a bit like me. It's cheap, it's old-fashioned, it's effective, and it's safe.
Right.
So I would just say go and you ideally get yourself tested, vitamin D level, and then to go down to high street food supplement and just start high strength vitamin D and stay on it. Just one pill a day. You've removed that issue and probably done yourself an awful lot of good.
Well, I don't think there's a better note to end the show on. So thank you everyone for watching. There you have it. Go out there, test your levels of vitamin D. If you're deficient, take the supplements and enjoy potentially a very healthy winter. We will see you on the next one. But most importantly, if you like the episode, do not forget to like, subscribe, and ring the ding dong. Thank you from me, Ahmed.
And thank you for me. Goodbye.